Good evening and welcome to tonight's virtual blended meeting of the Southwestern City School District Board of Education. The Ohio Legislature approved emergency legislation to allow school district boards of education to conduct their meetings by teleconference or video conference, providing the meeting can also be observed by the general public. In order to comply with this requirement, tonight's meeting is being broadcast live via Zoom and also on the district's YouTube channel. Having received confirmation that the video is streaming correctly, the Southwestern City School District Board of Education President, Mrs. Kathy Johnson, will now call the meeting to order.
Thank you for attending tonight's virtual blended meeting of the Southwestern City School District Board of Education. While the agenda will be visible during the meeting for those watching online, you may also follow along using the agenda posted on our website at www.swcsd.us under the Board of Education tab. Please note that tonight's meeting may not run perfectly, but we are doing our best to keep things running smoothly. The February 22nd, 2021 meeting of the Southwestern City School District Board of Education is now called to order. Roll call.
Caldwell.
Here.
Mr. Donofrio.
Here.
Mr. Ragland.
Here.
Mr. Schreiner.
Here.
Ms. Johnson.
Here. Next, we need a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Schreiner.
Anthony Caldwell.
Second, Schreiner.
Okay. Any changes to this? Seeing none. Roll call.
Caldwell.
Yes.
Mr. Schreiner.
Yes.
Mr. Donofrio.
Yes.
Mr. Ragland. Yes. Ms. Johnson.
Yes. Next, we move to a motion to approve the minutes from the February 8th, 2021 regular meeting.
So moved, Donofrio.
Okay. And we need a second.
Second, Ragland.
Okay, are there any corrections to those? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Donofrio.
Yes.
Mr. Ragland.
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell.
Yes.
Mr. Schreiner.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes. We have a couple of presentations this evening. We'll begin with Dr. Wise doing the DEI update.
Well, thank you, President Johnson, Vice President Ragland, members of the board. It's my privilege tonight to update you on our work that's happened this year with diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you remember back to June of last year, the board passed a resolution in regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and making this a more supportive and nurturing place for our students on behalf of the community. Let me start with thanking all of our folks that have engaged with us so significantly. We've had 4 groups that have actively been working in this area over the past year, 3 of which did not exist prior to the board resolution. And we again want to just take this time to thank them for embracing the work and engaging in the work. It is difficult work, but it's also rewarding as we go through that. So let me kind of kick off with a couple of things that I hope you walk away from before I really get into the slides. First of all, throughout our conversations, it's very clear that diversity makes us better and it enriches the district. And so that's one of those things that I want to highlight right off the bat. And the other thing that we've talked about that's kind of an overarching theme for all of this work is our work has really become focused on the what and how of creating a more accepting culture that nurtures a sense of belonging for our students while demanding high expectations for all. And so that you'll see that go through. You're on the right slide, Meredith, we're good. And so let's start with a few assumptions and core beliefs that we've come together with as the groups have done their work. After this, I'll go through a little bit of each of the groups' work after some definitions. But the first one is where I already highlighted. It's that idea that diversity enriches our work. Second assumption or core belief is that there is historical bias and discrimination that we need to work to counteract. Our third bullet is we want to make sure that folks understand there's a variety of discrimination and inequities that have happened over time, not just the traditional ones we think of with race and color. It comes in multiple ways and multiple forms. some subtle, some not so subtle from a historical standpoint, but the end result is they exist and they're unacceptable. From a district-wide perspective, this is not an administration or a board initiative. We actually hold all staff accountable to build this culture and develop it and hold them responsible to act accordingly to make this happen on behalf of our students and the community we serve. The last point I'll ask you to remember as we move through this over time, we want this to be aspirational in our goals. Even if we never achieve our goals, we think that it's important that we make our goals aspirational and bold and that we strive to make a difference. We don't want to just tinker with the system. We want to make sure that we make a substantial difference. So with that said, our groups, as we started, Meredith, next slide, started to look at definitions. Ohio State, and you will talk about them in a later slide, actually has a 3-page glossary that they do with their work. And so we took a look at their definitions. We took a look at our definitions at several other districts and tried to put some working definitions so that folks understood what we're talking about, because diversity, equity, and inclusion are not the same thing. In this area of diversity, it's the representation. It goes back to those inequities I described on the first assumption slide, and it's varied from that perspective. Equity is really about fair treatment. This is that concept about what is equity versus what is equal. And sometimes equal isn't always fair. And so the example most commonly given is if we're all standing behind a fence and I'm 6'1" and somebody else is 4'7" and they can't see over the fence. The idea is we provide the box or whatever they need to stand on it so that they can see over the fence as well. That's an equitable solution, not an equal solution. And so we talk about that from that perspective. In this third definition, I really want to highlight the term belonging, or a sense of belonging. We want folks to feel like they belong, that they're loved, that they're nurtured and supported when they're with us, and well, at all times, but especially when they're with us, and that we want to actively invite their contributions. Not just a passive, you're welcome here, but it's deeper than that. And so that inclusion piece is the other one that we want to highlight in the definitions from the perspective of we don't see these as the same. They are interrelated, but they are distinct as well. So that's the working definitions. From I mentioned the 4 groups. The first is the Inclusion Institute. We had staff members participate in an Inclusion Institute hosted by the Educational Service Center of Central Ohio, where they used outside facilitators to bring in. These are the 4 themes in the 4 areas that our group studied while they were with them and were facilitated. They looked at it from a variety of perspectives, but it was to develop the skill sets of those individuals who were involved and also broaden their knowledge base, as well as provide some frameworks that they could come back and work with our own people on. And so that's really the exploration. They have completed all 4 of those themes at this point and completed the Equity Institute. Brian Bowser's with us tonight if there's specific questions that I can't answer in regard to the Equity Institute. But this group now will disband as a group, and we will use the talents and expertise that they've gained and redistribute their membership through other committees on the district so that we can actually broaden our perspectives and our understandings as we try to continue to further that work. So the first group is the Inclusion Institute. Here's their 4 themes. Again, we had staff members participate. They thought the themes were very powerful, especially the first theme. And so we're looking forward to having their work brought back and included with the rest of our work. The second group is the Ohio State University Task Force. This is done with the Kirwan Institute. The Ohio State work is really focused much more on what we do with the adults in our organization than students. They are a resource creator and developer. They have several trainings, whether it be on implicit bias or institutional bias. We actually have 5 different modules that our trainers have been sent or have been trained on. We have 18 staff members now who have been trained to deliver that training back to our employee base. And so you'll see that come up. This is the Ohio State Task Force. There are several districts throughout Central Ohio. I believe there are 14. districts throughout Central Ohio that have engaged in this work with Ohio State University as well. And so we're excited about having some folks who have been trained and can deliver those modules to other groups throughout the district and other groups throughout the community. And so we will probably, well, I know more than probably, we will use these folks and the training that we've gained here. And we'll start that in the fall with our entire administrative team. We'll be using the panorama data from a later slide to target which specific area of their training we'll use in the modules. But we see this as an ongoing multi-year rollout where we will continue to train and become more aware in order to make a difference. So that's the Ohio State Task Force. The SWCSD group, technically this one was in existence prior to the board resolution. It's a result of the social emotional learning standards that were created by the state of Ohio, as well as our collective bargaining agreement, to look at the social emotional standards for implementation. If you remember back to our collective bargaining agreement, there is a specific report that's due from the SWCSD group to both myself and the union president. And so when they've committed or completed that work, we will then transition this SWCSD group to become more focused on students and what we do with students. Perhaps the most important part of the SWCSD work that I can share with you at this point is a panorama survey. It's done with students, and then there's a separate survey that's done with staff in order to gauge and create a baseline for where we are from their perspectives in regard to diversity, equity, inclusion, more specifically cultural competence, and that sense of belonging. Those are things that are highlighted very clearly in the panorama survey, and we'll get data on. We believe that survey, which actually wraps up this week, this month for all of our buildings, will then guide our work with which we do first and what are the biggest priorities as we move forward with students and staff to provide the training and to help create additional understandings to make a difference in the areas of diversity, equity, inclusion, and to create that better sense of belonging. So really, I want you to think of this group as it will evolve into more of a focus along with the district staff development committee that was already in existence to focus more on the training and what we do with students, what's done throughout building, professional development, and student programs. So that's the SWCSD group. The fourth group is the district-wide work group. Mr. Ragland represents the board on that group. There are 13 individuals. It's a cross-section. There are students, parents, community members, teachers, classified staff, as well as 2 administrators, and one of which is myself on that committee. We've spent significant time. In fact, we met probably close to every month since the start of the school. Done a deep dive within our data sets, looked for discrepancies, looked at some of the district policies, tried to evaluate areas of concern, as well as opportunities to make the biggest difference. We've looked at mobility rates, we've looked at student discipline, we've looked at academic achievement, we've looked at College Credit Plus, we've looked at AP courses, we've looked at some of the mentoring programs. We've had reports from some of our third-party vendors, such as I Know I Can. In addition, we've met with and listened to counselors in their perspective as well. So we've tried to do that. Based on where we're at this point, we believe this group will transition to more of a oversight and monitoring group to monitor and make sure that there's accountability for the work moving forward, that this group will meet 3-4 times a year type of thing, 2-3 times a year, whatever that takes, in order to make sure there are goals, that we're implementing what we say we will implement, and that we're following through and making a difference. And if we need to adjust course, this would be the group that recommends that adjustment in the direction for the district. So that's kind of how we got to this point. And so now let's talk about really where we are at this point. There were really 4 themes that emerged. And as we talked to districts throughout the state and other states that have been engaged in this work, these are the themes that came forward. This goes back to this idea of focusing on the what and the how, and by creating a accepting culture that with a sense of belonging, The first bullet is really about high expectations for all and making sure that we are aware of and understand what's in our courses of study and that we represent our students well within what we teach to them. A great example here is our work with Columbia University, the Teachers College, where they've taken a look at what's exactly in all the reading rooms for students. When you look at literature that's often included, if it's included in school libraries, many times it doesn't represent Black authors very well. Or the main character in many of the selections were individuals that had been oppressed. And so trying to find diverse reading materials, diverse materials in general, written from a wide variety of perspectives is really what this one's about. The second bullet gets to this point of there's not one path for all. We need to make sure there's multiple paths to achieve the outcome and have students and parents have ownership and buy-in over the path they choose. This third bullet is a little bit more the culturally relevant and responsive curricula as we take a look at, especially within the social sciences, what we provide and how we teach, making sure there's multiple perspectives that are shared and things don't come from just one point of view. And then the last piece is as well, policies and structures, practices that perpetuate inequity. And this isn't one, for me, this is one where, and when you look historically, it's easy to determine those policies like the redlinings or the Jim Crow laws or those things. It's much harder to see these things when you're in context and when you see them applied because you just don't recognize them. It's kind of like the fish in water. The fish doesn't know he's in water because he doesn't know anything else. And so sometimes we have to ask these questions, or as one of our community members very clearly said is, we need to continue to look at everything that we do in an ongoing basis and look at it from that lens and specifically ask the question, does this meet the criteria? Is this a policy that perpetuates inequity in some way? And so it's as much not about finding those areas, even though we are looking for those. This is about making sure as we develop and implement policy and practice that it is not or that it's equitable and that it's fair and it represents our population as well. The other piece then, the last slide that I have for you tonight is really about these actionable themes. I've talked already about Panorama tonight, and that will guide our work moving forward. This targeted and consistent support systems beginning in early age. The board's done a phenomenal job of investing in that through our, I just lost the term. Community and schools, individuals, as well as social workers and our other components. That's the type of thing we're looking at here. But the real question becomes, are we doing it in a systemic way, and can parents count on and understand where their contacts are at over a long period of time? It's about those connections, and once I know the organization and know who to go to, are they there for long periods? So whether it be a boys club, a girls club, how do we create a vertical articulation as students move through the system in order to support and nurture families? And again, you've invested heavily in community and schools, social workers, counselors, and those types of things. But do we need to look at that differently? Is there a way to put an advocacy program in place? That's really where this is headed. We don't have it defined at this point, but we believe we will over the next 14 months and have a better sense of a strategic way to go about this. Staff training, those are the areas for cultural competence, implicit and institutional bias, where we think we'll start, but we're still waiting on the Panorama data. And again, I believe we'll train all administrators in the fall, and you'll see buildings start to engage in this work in the spring. To a specific point here, and to make this even more concrete, each building will be asked to include into their continuous improvement plan a goal to promote inclusion and or equity, a specific outline goal that's in part of their continuous improvement plan. And so let me go through, first of all, diversity is not listed. Our human resources department, our personnel department, they will go through and they will continue to search out for candidates that will help us reflect our student population much better. But to be very candid, that is extremely difficult when the pool is just so limited. And so for next year, we will be recruiting at 6 additional historically black colleges that we have not recruited from in the past. But when you take a look, the candidate pool for Hispanic, Black is not huge in our area. There's a limited number of individuals there. We will continue to do that, but we didn't write a specific action item towards that from the standpoint of we are limited based on certifications and civil service on the entrance pass into the district. We will continue to recruit, expand those efforts, but it's not specifically listed. The other piece, when we look at this from a district perspective, is we are going to put a first priority on inclusion and start our work there. We believe that we are better positioned with the social emotional learning standards and the other infrastructure in place to put together comprehensive initiatives to improve and make a difference in inclusion. And then we will build into our equity. If buildings think that they're in a different place and would like to start with more of an equity focus, they're welcome to do so. But we think that sense of belonging is something that we worked on for quite a while and that we can continue to leverage and accelerate much more quickly. So I wanted to take this opportunity again to thank all those individuals. When you add it up in totality, there's hundreds of hours spent here by individuals over those various committees, and thank them for their work. We've also wanted to make sure that the board was very clear, and there's been action since the resolution last June, and we continue to try to make a difference in this area, and we are making progress, and we think that we will start to see that even take more shape and more form over the 21-22 school year. So with that, I know Carl's on and perhaps Brian, and we'd be glad to answer any questions that you have, or if I fumbled or beat it up too badly, if Carl or Brian will save me, that's appreciated.
Madam President.
Yes, Mr. Schreiner.
Yes, thank you. I don't have any questions. I just, having served on a number of diversity and equity and inclusion committees over the last few years, I just want to say thank you. The appreciation that we have for this deep dive, it's obvious that a lot of work was done and it's greatly appreciated. So thank you to all of those folks, please.
And I just have to say, just being part of one of the committees, it's an honor and a privilege. And I just had one question, and I probably answered it in the last meeting, but I don't remember, and I apologize. As far as the continuous improvement plan, would that be incorporated with the site steering committees, or that's going to be separate?
Now, the site steering committee is actually the group that approves the continuous improvement plan for the building. So they're the ones that do the work to help development. So yes, the SSC is involved in the creation of their continuous improvement plan. So that's engagement again from parents, classified, certificated staff, and administrative staff on that as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Wise. Seeing no more questions, we can move on to our next presentation, which is student graduation with Dr. Shuey.
Thank you, President Johnson, Vice President Ragland, members of the board, Dr. Wise, Mr. Garside. Happy to be with you tonight to talk a little bit about how we are working to develop paths for future success for our students. And really, before we get into the graduation plans itself, we should probably take a step back to see how did we get to this point of even having the conversation of graduation plans. You can go to the next slide. It really started off with the Ohio Revised Code, where you, the board, adopted the policy for students at risk of not qualifying for a high school diploma. And within that ORC, it stipulates that we have to develop, each district has to develop criteria for identifying at-risk students, developing procedures for identifying at-risk students, developing notification process, in which the district or school shall notify an at-risk student's parents, guardians that the student has been identified as a student at risk, and then assist these students with instructional supports or other support services that will help them graduate and qualify for a high school diploma. So within this policy, and here's where you see the embedded, develop a graduation plan for each student enrolled in grades 9 through 12 in the district or school. So that is, it says 1, but that should be the 5th bullet point there, is that the graduation plan is embedded within this larger context. So in order to really identify students that may be considered at risk, we have for several years now worked with the Tableau dashboard that allows us to make some identifications of students that may not be on track to graduate on time. So each grade level, and this is broken down by grade level, will have certain things like attendance measure, suspensions, discipline data, cumulative GPAs. Are they credit current? Are they passing their end of course exams that are required for graduation? Have they taken any college career readiness or AP courses or exams? Are they currently enrolled in any career technical program that leads to industry recognized credentials? So based on criteria in those areas, we can identify students who may be at risk, not meeting each of those criteria, starting with 9th grade, moving on through 12th grade. So that's really how we are identifying these students, along with anecdotal information from obviously staff that work with students every single year, because obviously sometimes students may be at risk due to non-academic factors, and that is taken into consideration as well. So as far as assisting at-risk students, we do have a really robust set of instructional or support services. And just to name a few, Zello, which is our replacement for Naviance. Zello is coming in and we are using it in the same vein that we use Naviance. It just happens to be a more engaging platform to really help students explore and plan around college and career readiness. And obviously part of that planning is when you're planning your future outside of high school, you actually have to get through high school. So it also includes that plan. Obviously we have supports like I Know I Can, and we've talked a lot about I Know I Can and the value they have with working with our staff to help advise students around their options post high school. Communities in school, career technical programs, we have credit flexibility, we have mentoring, tutoring, we have social emotional learning services, and I've just listed several which you've heard in Dr. Wise's presentation earlier, and then family engagement and support services, which is a large part of assisting at-risk students. Sometimes we also have to assist the families where those students are coming from. Obviously, we talked a little bit about the scope and sequence, and really in order to get to a graduation plan, we've developed out a scope and sequence that goes 7 through 12 about how to utilize the tools in Zello. And we did something similar with Naviance, but this one, the big difference here is this platform allows us to actually provide students embedded lessons that have these assessments, interest surveys, certain aptitude qualities around career explorations. And really that's all embedded in this platform so that we can really start getting the students thinking about where they are and where they want to be ultimately. So that takes us to developing a graduation plan for each student 9 through 12. And here's the trick. We have a college career readiness advising policy that we're supposed to function under. We also have the student success plan. We have the at-risk notification, and then we have the graduation plan. So the trick here was, how do we combine all of these different plans into a meaningful process and procedure that can be found in each of these buildings, that we are not doing 4 different things that are siloed, but we are bridging each of those silos to make a cohesive, systematic approach to graduation planning. And I have been working with and pulled a team of administrators and teachers and administrators, teachers, and counselors to work on this task. And I guess we are in our 2nd year of meetings at this point. And what we're looking to do is address the student's academic pathway that are going to meet the curriculum requirements and satisfy graduation conditions. And as you know, satisfying graduation conditions is a little tricky when we've had 4 different conditions in 4 different years, with each cohort being different. So IT department has also been brought in, and they have been an invaluable partner in this process as well, trying to automate some of these plans as much as possible. That takes a little bit of the work off of the clerical side of things and transactional side, and leaves more of the work for our staff around the relational side with the students. So we're really grateful that we have that opportunity. We also have to make sure that these graduation plans are developed jointly by the student and the representative of the school, and we have to have the parent or guardian assisting in the development of the plan. It is the student's plan, and we're helping them facilitate the plan by monitoring and exposing them to opportunities that they may or may not have known that we have available to them. We also have to take a look at a plan that has, what are we going to do if there's a lack of progress in meeting the terms of the plan? And so the plan has to incorporate that as well. And ultimately, if a student does have an IEP, that can be used in place of the graduation plan if it's an appropriate replacement. So that will depend on the student's identified disability and how their IEP is written, including those the transitions into post-secondary life, which is embedded within the IEP as well. So I guess at this point, a little bit about the components of the actual plan. Obviously, demographic information. We have to have post-high school goals. We have to have some place where we can really document credit that is earned at the high school. What about their assessments? Are they meeting the end of course requirement, graduation requirements? If the new requirements also include the demonstration of competency or the competency alternatives, we have to have a place to go that also takes that in consideration. Also, demonstration of college and career readiness. That includes the graduation seals, which we've discussed at previous board meetings as well. And then actionable steps to support or intervene if students are not on track to graduate. So as you can see, this is a very heavy lift. And here's the thing, these graduation plans are as good as the work that happens with them. So within the graduation plan, the other thing the team has been really working hard on is how do we take the systematic approach within the school to make sure that we are advising and guiding and intervening with students around these graduation plans. And it cannot just fall on counselors in the building. So how are we going to have this plan as a practice, community of practice amongst administrators, counselors, and the students, teachers, along with our communities in school, and I know I can, and other supports that come along with that. So what we did is, after many, many different meetings, and we looked at many, many different templates, and we came up with the components that we believe, and this is a draft right now, that we believe would take bits of information that are currently found in multiple different places and try to put them in one document. And so, you know, the question will be, who owns this document? Where's the document going to live? Is this going to be something that is done manually? And the reality is right now, that is what we're working on with IT. How do we turn this document into something that can pull from Infinite Campus and pull from Zello and pull from Tableau and live in Infinite Campus like so many other things do? So can this be a part of our student information system? And that's what we're these are the things that we're really grappling with right now. So the graduation plan in itself has those components which I mentioned. It does give us information about their post-secondary plans. Are they going to be going directly into the workforce? Are they going into the military? Do they have apprenticeships or internships? Do they want to do 2-year, 4-year degrees? Are they undecided? Do they have current 504 plans? Are they students that are ELL? Do they have an IEP? All of these things are part of a larger advising process that we're developing out in each of our buildings. We are really going to get down to the granular level of knowing our students, understanding who they are, what they're about, what they're interested in, what they're capable of, and then encouraging them in their path forward. And this is going to be, one of our other forays into really deliberate scheduling. Sometimes we find students are taking a course load that does not match at all their interest or what they want to do out of high school. So if we could substitute 3 of their 4 courses for things that actually interest them, they would most likely be more apt to pay attention and do well in school. So again, this is a heavy lift. You can see the document for yourself. I actually am meeting with the team. We just met yesterday around this document. We beat it up a little bit. We're making some edits and some revisions. We're taking some things out. And then we're going to be meeting with IT to see how we can best automate this as much as possible, because a lot of this information already does exist in Infinite Campus and Tableau. So it looks a little overwhelming. And the last section here that is being scrolled through now is a student's, what they can do is they can take some control themselves and help also monitor their own successes, as well as us monitoring them. They're going to monitor their own understanding of their plans. And here's the part that you can see right now about the interventions. What are our plans for those students if they're not on track? And here's where we're going to document that. So that is really all I have at this moment. I will tell you that this is work that we are not completed with, and we won't be finished with it, because we're always going to come back and make some adjustments and make it better and more meaningful.
Okay, thank you. What questions do you have for Dr. Shuey?
Madam President.
Yes.
Dr. Shuey, I just want to thank you and your team for the focus you put on this. I've watched this firsthand of the intervention and attention that the staff spend trying to make sure that every student who has a desire to graduate achieves that goal, or at least gives it their best effort. Everyone from the school bus driver to the cafeteria worker to the folks that are working inside our classrooms as aides and helpers and tutors and everything else, the coaches, of course, our teachers and administrators and guidance counselors. And it was so awesome at graduation last year in the modified version that we had, just to see the joy on students' faces who knew it was that last paper or that last assignment that they turned in that really helped them achieve that goal, and the sense of pride and accomplishment that came with that. And so to the whole team that works on this in all of our schools, just huge kudos to them, because you are making a considerable difference in the future of those students' lives. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you again, Dr. Shuey.
Thank you.
Moving now, we have items for action facilities development. Mr. Donofrio.
Thank you, President Johnson, and good evening, everyone. On tonight's agenda for facilities development, we have one item, a resolution authorizing and approving the construction documents phase submission notebooks for the 4 new middle schools. Having reviewed this item for all 4 projects, I recommend its passage and move to do so at this time.
Happy to second. Schreiner.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Donofrio.
Yes.
Mr. Schreiner.
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell.
Yes.
Mr. Ragland.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes. Next, board items. Seeing none of those, moving on now to executive session. It's recommended the Board of Education adjourn to executive session according to policy 0166 to consider the appointment or employment of a public employee. I'll make that motion. We need a second.
Second, Caldwell?
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Roll call.
Mr. Caldwell,
Yes.
Mr. Donofrio,
Yes.
Mr. Ragland,
Yes.
Mr. Schreiner,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes. And as we come out of executive session, I foresee no further action by this board. Thank you all for attending tonight's meeting. Okay, we are officially back in session, or do we need to do that vote over again?
Gonna revote. Here we go. Can you hear me now?
Okay,
Hold on just a minute. Let me see if they're all. Okay.
All right. We're gonna call roll call again.
And this is the roll call to come out of executive session. No action has been taken.
Mr. Caldwell,
Yes.
Mr. Donofrio,
Yes.
Mr. Ragland,
Yes.
Mr. Schreiner,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
here. Now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. We need a second.
Second,
Second, Ragland.
Reiner.
We'll let Shriner do it.
Mr. Schreiner, okay. Roll call.
Mr. Caldwell,
Yes.
Mr. Shriner,
Yes.
Mr. Donofrio.
Yes.
Mr. Ragland,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Good night.
Texas.
Good night.
Yeah, that's right, exactly.